Have you ever wondered why the worst things seem to happen when you're trying your hardest to be a good person? I used to ask myself that too, over and over again. I still remember that night. The air was sharp and cold. I was alone in a small room at a monastery high in the mountains. Only the faint light of an oil lamp flickered beside me. Outside, the wind howled through pine trees like a question with no answer. The world felt like it had turned its back on me. Every effort I had made to love, to be kind, to stay honest, seemed to be rewarded only with loss, betrayal, and silence. There was a moment I almost whispered to the darkness, "Am I being punished for trying to be good?" But then, the old monk, he never raised his voice, never judged anyone. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder and asked me, "Do you really believe things just happen by accident?" I had no answer. He didn't push. He simply smiled, gazing out into the moonlit forest, and said, "Nothing comes to you by mistake. Even your suffering has a reason. You just can't see it yet." That one sentence cracked something open inside me. And that's why I want to tell you this story, not to make you believe in fate, but to help you remember you're not powerless. You are creating your life, moment by moment, with every choice you make. As the Buddha once taught, no raindrop falls in the wrong place, and no sorrow arrives at the wrong time. If you've ever felt like life is working against you, if you've ever thought you were carrying pain you didn't deserve, then maybe, just maybe, this story will help you see things differently. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share is something no one ever teaches us in school, no therapist puts into words, but it just might change the way you see your whole life from this moment on. I arrived at that monastery on an autumn afternoon when the pine leaves were starting to turn a deep shade of rust and the sun seemed slower than usual to set. The path leading up the mountain was winding, silent, no cars, no cell signal. Only the sound of my own footsteps on uneven stones and the wind weaving through tall trees. You won't find this monastery on any travel guide. It's small, unassuming, tucked into a hidden valley between two ridges. There are no giant golden Buddha statues, no grand entrance gates, just a few wooden rooms, an old clay stove, and a Zen garden filled with white stones. Locals call it the place of no thing. No name, no temple, no clinging. I didn't come there looking for the Buddha. I came to escape from the world, from people, from myself. You know that feeling, don't you? That quiet ache when you've done everything right. You've lived kindly, loved with sincerity, worked hard, tried your best not to hurt anyone, and still, everything falls apart. The person you trusted most turns their back. The one you loved walks away. What you fought so hard to protect crumbles like ash between your fingers, and you begin to ask yourself, maybe I'm the problem. I don't remember how long I sat beneath that tree in front of the meditation hall. I only remember the faint scent of sandalwood, the soft rhythm of a wooden bell echoing from within, and the eyes of the old monk, still and vast, as if he'd seen through me long before I even arrived. He didn't ask for my name, didn't ask what I was running from. He simply handed me a broom and pointed toward the courtyard scattered with dry leaves. And so I swept, morning after morning, evening after evening. The leaves fell again. I swept again. No lecture, no scripture. But somewhere, within that quiet, repetitive act, something inside me began to stir. A voice I'd never truly heard before. A voice I'd buried beneath the noise of the world. And little by little, I began to understand. I hadn't come there to run away. I had come to remember. The first few days at the monastery passed slowly, like still water in a silent lake. No one questioned me. No one offered advice. Just sweeping leaves, cooking rice, chopping wood, and silent sitting. Hours on end. I told myself, give it a few weeks. Rest. You'll feel better again. But the quieter things became, the more chaotic I felt inside. What I thought was peace was actually just numbness. What I had called forgiveness was me denying my true feelings. And slowly, I began to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. Not because someone had hurt me, but because I no longer knew what I was living for. The beliefs that once anchored me, be kind and life will be kind to you, started to dissolve like mist. I used to think, if I'm gentle, if I don't fight, if I always help others, then surely life will take care of me. But you know what? It was that very belief, that goodness always protects you, that quietly led me into suffering. I kept giving, even when it left me empty. I stayed silent, even when my heart was breaking. I tried to be a good person, even when no one needed that from me. One night, the rain came down hard. I had a fever. No one noticed. I lay in my room, drenched in sweat and blankets, floating in and out of sleep, as if falling into some nameless void. And in that half-dreaming, half-awake haze, I saw myself, alone, small, barefoot in the monastery courtyard, standing in the rain, and I looked up into the sky and whispered, words I never expected to admit, if being good still leads to pain, then is it even worth it? That was when the tears came, not out of weakness, but because, for the first time, I let myself say it out loud. I'm tired, I'm angry, this feels unfair. And that moment, that raw, aching honesty, wasn't my breakdown. It was the beginning of awakening. Because peace doesn't come from pretending, and healing doesn't come from suppressing what's true. Maybe you're like I was back then, trying to be good, trying to endure, trying to be right. But deep down, there's a hurting child inside who has never been heard. If you're still here, still listening at this point, then let yourself pause, just for a moment. You don't have to be strong right now. You just have to be honest, because sometimes peace doesn't come from living right, but from finally living real. The morning after that fevered night, I woke to the scent of warm ginger. Someone had quietly placed a cup of tea beside my bed. I stepped outside. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell lightly, softly, like a whisper over the stones. The old monk was already there, sitting beneath the worn wooden eaves. His hands cradled a clay cup, his gaze lost in the rain, as if he was speaking to it and listening back. I sat beside him, saying nothing. For a while, there was only the sound of falling rain. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, he asked, "You cried last night, didn't you?" I wasn't surprised, and I wasn't ashamed. I simply nodded. "Are you angry?" he asked again. "Yes," I said after a pause. "I'm angry at the person who left me, angry at the things I can't control, and maybe angry at myself for being so weak." He nodded, not to judge, just understanding. "And what will you do with that anger?" he asked. I took a moment, but deep down I already had an answer. "I'll meditate more, read more Dharma, practice kindness, learn to let go." I thought I had said something wise, noble even, but the old monk just looked at me, his eyes deep like ancient water, and gently smiled. "That's how you've been running away," he said. "Not healing." I froze. "You've been kind, not because you are peaceful, but because you fear being hurt. You try to let go, Not because you understand, but because you're afraid to face what's inside. And you sit in meditation, not to listen to yourself, but to silence yourself. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because every word was true. Some people escape through alcohol, he said. Some through work. You escape through the Dharma. That sentence, it rang through my chest like a bell splitting the silence. I had used what was good to hide what was broken. I had used spiritual practice as anesthesia. So what should I do now? I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He set down his tea, then pointed toward the garden where a wildflower was blooming, even as the rain still fell. Do you see that flower? It doesn't ask where it is. It doesn't wait for sunshine. It doesn't compare itself to other flowers. It just blooms, because that is what it was born to do. Healing is not about trying to become something else. It's about allowing yourself to be exactly who you are, wounds and all, with light and with shadow. I sat there quiet. It felt like someone had unlocked a forgotten door in my chest, and a single beam of light slipped in. You don't need to keep trying to be a good person, he said, standing to leave. You only need to be honest with every feeling and meet yourself where you really are, without turning away. He walked off as light as mist, and I remained there, alone in the sound of the rain. Maybe you're doing the same thing I was, telling yourself to let go, telling yourself to forgive, telling yourself to be at peace. But sometimes the pressure to be okay is the very thing that keeps you from actually breathing. If you're still here, still listening, place a hand on your heart, take a deep breath, and ask yourself gently, am I healing, or am I just pretending I'm fine? That day I sat again beneath the eaves. The sky was unusually clear after days of rain. I turned to the old monk and asked, why does everything keep changing? Just when I get used to something, it disappears. Just when I learn to trust, someone leaves. I'm tired of all these unexpected losses. He smiled, gently picked up a fallen leaf from the temple courtyard and said, do you know why this leaf fell? I shook my head. Because it was time, not because of the wind, not because the tree rejected it, but because the nature of all things is impermanence. He looked at me, eyes neither sad nor cheerful, just still. We suffer because we believe things will stay, but loved ones will leave, jobs will end, health will fade, even this body won't last forever. I lowered my head. Something in my chest tightened. Then what's the point? I asked. If everything's going to change, why even try? He placed his hand on his chest, then gently on mine. Because it's the changing that makes each moment precious. If you know it won't last, you cherish each glance, each meal, each embrace, so much more. Impermanence doesn't exist to scare you. It exists to wake you up. If you've ever mourned something that's already gone, ask yourself this: did I fully live it while it was still here? And if not, then let this very moment be different. Live slowly, live deeply, as if it could vanish tomorrow, because it just might. I stayed quiet for a while after his teaching on impermanence. Something inside me was dissolving, gently but painfully. Then I asked him, if everything changes, then why do I keep experiencing the same kind of pain? I always fall in love with people who don't stay. I keep being left behind, even when I didn't do anything wrong. The old monk didn't answer right away. He stepped down into the courtyard, picked up a small pebble, and dropped it into a basin of water. Ripples spread outward, gentle but unending. Karma isn't punishment, he said. It's a feedback loop. What you put out, the world reflects back. But I never put out anything bad, I interrupted, almost offensively. He looked at me, not harshly, just quietly. It's not just actions, it's emotions. It's unconscious habits and mental patterns you repeat without knowing. You didn't do wrong by loving someone, but if you carry the fear of abandonment inside you, you'll unconsciously choose people who confirm that fear. And when they leave, you'll say, "See? I'm always left behind." That's karma too, a cycle of belief you're keeping alive. I felt a cold wave run through me, not from the weather, but from the truth. "So, I created my own suffering?" I asked. "In part," he nodded, "and in part, it comes from others' karma. But don't forget, you too may have been karma for someone else." I froze. "Have you ever been the one who walked away?" he asked. "Have you ever hurt someone by going silent? Left someone behind because you were still broken?" I couldn't answer. My throat tightened. The twist wasn't in discovering someone had betrayed me. It was in finally seeing someone I'd been avoiding all along. Myself. The old monk returned to the steps and sat beside me. He poured more tea, his voice soft like mist. Understanding karma isn't about blaming, it's about freeing yourself. Because if you're aware enough to say, this is a pattern, then you're aware enough to pause it. And wherever you pause, karma pauses too. I looked at him. Everything seemed to still in that quiet breath between us. "But how do I pause it, Master?" I asked, "when it all feels so automatic inside me?" He smiled, eyes drifting toward the distant mountains. "Not with force, but with mindfulness." If you've ever felt trapped in a familiar cycle of pain, try pausing, not to run away, but to listen. Because karma isn't always outside you. Sometimes, so it's just one quiet thought you've never dared to examine. I repeated the monk's words, not with force, but with mindfulness. Then I asked softly, "Is mindfulness just meditation, Master?" He smiled, a smile light as wind through trees. "It's not just about sitting," he said. "Mindfulness is when you eat, and you know you are eating. When you feel pain, and you can say, 'I'm hurting right here.' It's when you breathe, and you feel the entire fragility and miracle of that breath." He paused, poured more tea. The rising steam curled into the morning air, then disappeared. "You've been alive all these years, but tell me, have you ever truly lived? Or have you just reacted, rushed, survived, only to realize by the end of each day that you don't even remember how you felt yesterday?" I said nothing. That question cut me, not violently, but deep. "Mindfulness isn't about escaping sadness," he continued. "It's about staying present enough to see where the sadness comes from. And once you see the root, you can begin to let it go." If you've been living for weeks or months like a machine, maybe now is the moment to stop, just to breathe and finally see yourself. Because only when you wake up can you begin to realize everything you're experiencing didn't happen by accident. There is always a reason. And that leads us to what the monks call interdependent origination. After his words on mindfulness, I stayed quiet for a long time. Then I asked, if I can see the root of my sadness, does that mean I can cut it off? The old monk gently shook his head. Not cut, he said, but understand, because suffering doesn't arise by itself. He picked up a dry blade of grass and drew a circle in the dirt. In the Buddha's teaching, we call this interdependent origination, he said. It means everything arises from conditions. Nothing exists in isolation. Nothing just happens. A teacup exists because of clay, fire, the hands of a potter, and the intention to make it. Your pain, too, has its causes. I asked softly, so, I suffer because someone showed up in my life? He looked at me. Long, still. Number, you suffer because you believe something that wasn't fully true. You believed someone would stay forever, that sacrificing yourself meant being loved, that if you were kind enough, life would always go your way. And then his voice dropped into a quiet gravity. That belief was a condition. When it combined with past wounds, certain people, certain moments, suffering arose. I sat still. The twist didn't come from outside. It came from a numbing realization. I was part of the reason I got hurt. If you've ever asked, why did this happen to me? Maybe the better question is, how was I part of what made it happen? And if you're ready to truly look into the roots of suffering, then it's time to step into the Four Noble Truths, where healing doesn't begin with denial, but with truth. I looked at the monk, my eyes beginning to see something I had never truly seen before. If all suffering has conditions, I asked, can I stop it from happening? He nodded gently. Not stop, he said, but understand. Because to end something, you must know where it begins. He drew in the dirt with a small stick. The Buddha called them the Four Noble Truths. 4 truths we cannot escape. The first truth, life is suffering. No one is spared, because the nature of life is change, loss, separation. Don't resist. Don't sugarcoat. The second truth, there is a cause of suffering, craving, clinging, illusion. You want things to go your way. You want to hold on. You don't want anything to change. I nodded, because I had done all those things, clinging to a person, a feeling, a dream. The third truth, suffering can end, not by fixing others, but by transforming yourself. When you stop clinging, suffering has nothing to hold on to. I felt my throat tighten. A quiet fear rose in me. But if I let go of everything, what's left of me? He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. And this is the fourth truth. There is a path, not to make you someone else, but to bring you back to yourself, awake, compassionate, free. It's called the Eightfold Path, a way of seeing clearly, understanding deeply, and living kindly. The twist isn't that suffering exists. The twist is that suffering doesn't come from life itself. It comes from how we cling to it. And if you've ever believed you'd be happy if only the world changed, then maybe you missed one quiet truth. Suffering can end, not when the world calms down, but when you're finally willing to stop. And if you're still here, still listening, then take one more step with me, because now it's no longer just about knowing. It's time to choose to change. That day, after hearing the Four Noble Truths, I didn't say much. I simply asked the monk for one quiet morning to sit alone in the forest behind the monastery, a place where few ever went. I sat beneath an ancient tree, no chanting, no proper meditation, just sitting. And for the first time, I didn't run from what I felt. I let the memories come of the one who left, of a lonely childhood, of all the times I tried so hard to be good, just to feel loved. I didn't try to understand it anymore. I just witnessed it. And in that silence, something broke through like light-piercing fog. I had spent my life thinking I was a victim of the world, but forgot that I helped build the very walls I felt trapped inside. I used to believe someone would come and save me, but now I saw what I really needed was to stop running from myself. I once thought letting go meant losing, but now I understood. Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means no longer holding on to what was never truly yours. I returned to the monastery as the sun began to set. The monk was still there, as if he had never moved. I bowed without words. He understood. From now on, I said, I will live more slowly, not to avoid pain, but to truly live. He nodded gently. That's enough, he said. You don't need to do anything grand. If each step you take is done with presence, that alone is a revolution. I didn't become enlightened overnight. There are still mornings when sadness visits me without a name. But since that day, I no longer hide. And strangely, when I stopped trying to be good, I began to touch something truly beautiful: inner freedom. You don't have to change the world. Just change the way you look at yourself when you stand in front of the mirror. And if you're still here, still listening, maybe you're standing at that same threshold I once faced, between knowing and beginning to live differently. So if you're ready, come with me to the final part. A closing, not to end something, but to begin living from a new place within. It's been months since I left the monastery. I didn't become a meditation teacher. I didn't start a healing retreat. I didn't disappear into the forest to live a quiet life. I still live in the city, where car horns replace temple bells and deadlines ring louder than gongs. But one thing is no longer the same. I no longer lose myself every time life doesn't go my way. I no longer look for reasons to feel sorry for myself. I've learned to pause when the waves inside me start to rise. I've learned to exhale when old memories come knocking. And I've learned to look into someone's eyes without needing them to stay forever. Not because I've stopped feeling pain, but because I'm no longer afraid of it. I've come to see that peace isn't the absence of suffering. It's the ability to walk through suffering without losing yourself. And what I once thought was the end turned out to be just a door inward, to a place where no one else can walk for me, where only I and the truth remain. Maybe you're standing at that door too, still uncertain, still tempted to turn back, still wondering if you're strong enough. But if you've listened this far, then perhaps somewhere deep within, a part of you is already ready to step through. I don't know who you are. I don't know what kind of storm you're walking through right now. But if you've listened all the way to this point, then maybe you're stronger than you think. You don't have to change everything overnight. You don't have to understand it all. Just don't abandon yourself again. Not this time. If this story touched something inside you, leave a quiet mark, a whisper, a sentence, a story of your own, so I know I wasn't sitting here alone. And if you think this journey has come to an end, remember this: there is still one thing I've never told you, and that will be the story we share next. I'll see you on the other side of silence.